So I was woken up about 2 o'clock in the morning from a really deep sleep. The phone was ringing and I sat bolt upright in bed. I wasn't used to calls at that time in the morning, and answered the phone, and it was the local hospital. And they had a young couple in with their 6-month-old child, and the child sadly was dying, and they wanted to have a priest with them and to pray with them and to bless their child. So I went there. I got out of bed, jumped in the car, drove to the hospital. Now, I don't know what hospitals are like where you are, but in London, they're really, really big. And so I managed to get myself a parking space, and then I had to sort of find my way round to the main entrance and then through this huge hospital up the lifts to the right floor. And by the time I got there, the child was, well, had almost died. It was, she was at her sort of final breaths, really. So I managed to have a bit of time to pray with the family and to anoint the child with oil before she died. And of course the family were absolutely devastated. Of course they were, for so many different reasons. But one of the things that was devastating them the most was that they felt, because the child had died without being baptized, she was going to hell. And they were absolutely distraught about this. Now, of course, as a Christian, that isn't a belief I hold to at all. I think God's grace goes far beyond the boundaries of that. But anyway, they were convinced that their little daughter was going to go to hell. So they asked me to baptize her after she died. Now, this was a real quandary for me, because as a Christian, I don't believe that that is right to baptize dead people. I don't think it would have made any difference whatsoever to her eternal salvation. So theologically, I felt I was right to say no, and to explain why I felt it was inappropriate. But I looked at these grieving parents and I saw their pain, and I thought this one simple act is going to give them so much peace in their hearts about their dead child. And so I had a choice between truth and love. Which would you have chosen? What would you have chosen to do? Would you have chosen to do something theologically inappropriate at that moment in the name of love? Or do you think that love should have been somehow slightly sacrificed in order to teach them theologically the truth about God? I took the baby in my arms and I baptized the baby there and then. It was a really difficult one. But you know, it's that thing. We don't always need to be right. We don't always need to be seen to be right about God all the time. The temptation for us as Christians is to want to always to be right and to be seen to be right. I think we live in a society now where it's so difficult to back down, isn't it? It's so difficult to accept that we might be wrong about things. People scarcely apologise for anything anymore. I mean, don't get me started on this. But the closest you get to an apology very often is where somebody might send you an email, or they might say to you, "I'm sorry if you felt I was overstepping the mark." Well, that's not an apology. That's gaslighting. That's suggesting that they didn't overstep the mark. The problem is that I felt they overstepped the mark. But anyway, don't get me started on that. But there is a temptation for us, isn't there, to want to always to be seen to be right, to be holding the truth. Now, truth is important. As Christians, of course, we believe that truth is important. Jesus described himself as the way, the truth, and the life. So, you know, our faith is very much founded on the notion and the importance of truth for that very reason. But there's a lovely little letter at the end of the New Testament 2 John. It's just before the book of Revelation. You've got 3 John and Jude after it, but it's a tiny little book at the end of the New Testament. And it's only 13 verses long. Now, in the book of John, 2 John, in these 13 verses, 5 times he mentions the idea of truth, how important it is to cling to the truth, how important it is to found our faith on the truth, how important it is to follow Jesus as the truth. So for John, truth was really, really important. And of course it was important for him at that time, because there were lots and lots of Christian teachers going around who were sort of teaching a different gospel and who were watering down the Christian faith. And he was saying to his followers and the congregation at the church to which he was writing, you know, you've got to cling on to the truth and make sure that nothing gets in the way of that. What is true and what is right is important. But in that same letter, in 2 John, in those 13 verses, where he uses the word truth 5 times, he also uses the word love 5 times as well. The importance of loving one another, the importance of loving God, the importance of loving ourselves. I think there's something about the Christian faith where we need to get the balance right between truth and love, because love without truth is sort of sentimental and weak, but truth without love can be harsh and very unforgiving. Sometimes I think in life we need to choose in a particular situation between truth and love. Are we going to be seen to be right and holding on to what is true? Or in that situation, do we sometimes need to bite our lip and respond to the other person out of love? Now, often when we feel we need to defend truth, what we're not doing is defending Jesus as the way, the truth and the life. What we're often doing is defending our own opinions, that what we believe is true. And there is a difference between defending the truth of Jesus and what you and I hold to be true as our own personal opinions about matter of faith. Sometimes when we are defending truth, we are defending self, not God. You know, it's okay sometimes to be silent and to be misunderstood if the greater good of love is being served. Now, where do we see a really profound and powerful example of that? Well, of course, we see it in the life of Jesus. You'll remember that when before Jesus was crucified, he was put on trial and by the Jewish leaders and by Pontius Pilate. And many times in the narratives about his trial, Jesus was silent. He didn't defend himself. He didn't justify himself, which led to him being misunderstood. But he knew that the greater good of love was being served in the events going on around him and to him. And so Jesus put love above self-justification, above the proclamation of truth in that moment. So I would say that, you know, we don't always need to be seen to be right. We don't always need to be seen to be holding the truth. Sometimes love requires us to take a different path. Sometimes love requires us to be misunderstood. Sometimes love requires us to be silent, not to justify ourselves, but to instead be prepared to take the harder path so that the greater good of love will be served. It's not easy. It's not easy to lay aside our own sense of self, our own sense of rightness, to serve the greater good. But you know, it is the way of Christ. That's exactly what Jesus did at his trial. So, yeah, pray for wisdom that at the right times, when you've got decisions to make, and it seems like you've got to choose between truth and love, between self-justification of your rightness and love, pray for the wisdom that at the right time you will be able to choose the right path. Hope that's been helpful. Thanks so much for being with me today, and I look forward to being with you again soon. Take care. Bye.